All right, UPSC aspirants, welcome back to another deep dive with us where we unpack and go deeper into some of the most important issues of the day, particularly stuff that's relevant to GS2.
Absolutely.
Governance, economic development,
Yeah.
social justice, all that good stuff. And, might even pop up in prelims, so got to stay sharp.
Absolutely. Got to be prepared for anything.
So today we're looking at this really interesting analysis from the Hindu, and it gets at this core question. Can a country with a massive workforce like India actually be held back by relying on cheap labor?
Yeah, it's a real paradox, isn't it? You'd think abundance of inexpensive labor would be an automatic win, but this analysis is saying not so fast.
Exactly. And they highlight this kind of shocking stat. Only about 21.7% of Indian workers have actual salary jobs.
Wow.
And even then, a good chunk of those folks lack proper contracts or benefits. So even before we talk about policies that might push for more work,
Right.
we're going to think about the vast majority who are already in incredibly vulnerable positions.
Absolutely. It raises these fundamental questions about the kind of growth we're aiming for.
Right.
Can we really achieve sustainable, equitable development by just squeezing more out of an already precarious workforce?
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't that just deepen the inequalities that are already there?
Totally. I mean, it's like, trying to win a race in a bullock cart when everyone else has moved on to cars.
That's a great analogy. It highlights the fundamental difference in approach. I mean, developed nations didn't get rich by just making people work longer hours.
Right.
They got there by increasing productivity per worker through innovation and technology. Think about a handloom weaver versus a modern textile factory. The output explodes, but fewer people are toiling endlessly.
Okay, so in theory, that makes sense. But why aren't Indian businesses making these big investments in tech and innovation?
Right.
Is it just short-sightedness? Are they lacking access to capital?
Well, there's no one answer, right? It's a complex mix of factors. Some businesses, maybe they're just prioritizing short-term profits. Others might genuinely struggle to get financing, or maybe they lack the know-how to effectively use new technologies. And then there could be cultural factors too, a resistance to moving away from traditional methods. But the article points to this other factor that's particularly concerning, and that is this shift towards what economists call informality.
Okay, so break that down for us. What does informality really mean in this context?
Essentially, it's the part of the economy that's operating outside the purview of, regulations and labor laws.
Okay.
Think about unregistered workshops, street vendors, or even contract labor within big companies. These workers, they often lack basic protections like minimum wage benefits, job security.
Right.
And for businesses operating in this informal space, it lets them avoid compliance costs.
So they can keep their labor super cheap.
Exactly.
So are we saying that businesses are deliberately choosing to stay informal just to exploit cheap labor and dodge all the rules?
Well, the article certainly suggests that it's a major factor.
How?
It points to the explosion of microenterprises, especially in manufacturing hubs like Coimbatore and Ludhiana. These tiny workshops often operating on razor-thin margins.
Yeah.
They rely on cheap informal labor to make components for bigger companies.
And it's not just limited to these tiny microenterprises, right?
No, not at all.
The article mentions how contract labor in bigger factories has also exploded in recent years.
Absolutely. Since 2011, over 56% of new factory jobs have been contract-based, not permanent.
Wow.
So that means no benefits, no job security, and often much lower wages than their permanent counterparts.
It's basically a system that encourages businesses to keep labor cheap and disposable.
Sadly, yeah, that's one way to put it.
And of course, we can't forget about migrant workers in all of this.
Right, of course not.
They're often the most vulnerable, facing exploitation at every turn.
Absolutely. They often come from marginalized backgrounds, lack resources, lack the networks to negotiate for better conditions. So they're willing to accept extremely low wages and terrible working conditions just to survive. And that reliance on cheap, exploitable migrant labor just keeps feeding the cycle of informality and low productivity.
Right. Okay, so we've got this it's a complex situation. Businesses, especially in these labor-intensive sectors, are encouraged to just stay informal, keep wages rock bottom, avoid investing in tech or training their workers.
Right.
But what are the actual consequences of this whole cheap labor trap? Is it really holding back India's economic progress?
Well, the evidence really points to, yes, it absolutely is one of the most obvious consequences is low productivity.
Right.
When businesses aren't investing in technology or training, their workers simply can't produce as much output per hour compared to countries that have, embraced those advancements.
And that low productivity has these like ripple effects across the whole economy, right?
Absolutely.
If we're not producing goods and services efficiently, you know, it impacts our competitiveness globally. It limits our economic growth.
Exactly. It's a vicious cycle. And the article uses a great example for UPSC folks, the garment industry. India has huge potential there, right? Massive workforce, long tradition of textile production.
Right.
But our share of global garment exports is tiny compared to countries like China, Bangladesh, Vietnam.
But why is that? Don't we have like the cheap labor advantage that those countries are supposedly using?
We do, but that's only one piece of the puzzle you see. While India has been fixated on cheap labor, these other countries have been strategically investing in modernizing their factories,
Okay.
adopting automation, focusing on efficiency and quality. They've moved beyond just competing on price. They're producing higher value garments.
So it's like while we're stuck in this race to the bottom on wages, they're investing in moving up the value chain.
Precisely. And the results speak for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's not just garments. We see similar trends in agriculture, for example.
Hmm.
India has millions of smallholder farmers, many stuck using outdated techniques, lacking access to modern tech or financing.
Right.
This keeps productivity low, traps people in poverty.
So this reliance on cheap labor is like a major factor in just perpetuating poverty and inequality.
Absolutely. It's not just economics. It's a social justice issue deeply intertwined with governance challenges.
And something you as potential policymakers need to be very aware of.
Absolutely.
So we've spent a lot of time like diagnosing the problem, right?
Yeah.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk solutions. What can actually be done to break free from this cycle
Right.
and create a more, sustainable, equitable, productive economic model for India?
Well, first we got to ditch this idea that cheap labor is our biggest asset.
Okay.
We need to start seeing our workforce as human capital, something to invest in and develop.
So instead of competing on low wages, we should be focused on building a skilled, productive workforce that can compete on quality and innovation.
Exactly.
But how do we actually make that happen?
It's going to take a multi-pronged approach for sure. Firstly, significant investment in education and skills training, particularly in areas relevant to a modern economy.
Makes sense. We need to equip our workforce with the tools and knowledge to succeed in those higher value jobs, not just the low-skilled, labor-intensive ones.
Precisely. And that's where strategic government policy comes in, policies that incentivize businesses to invest in training and upskilling their workforce.
So like tax breaks for companies that invest in employee development programs, subsidies for vocational training initiatives, that sort of thing?
Those are definitely options worth exploring, but it's not just about skills training. We also have to tackle this issue of informality head on.
Okay, so how do we move those millions of workers from those, precarious informal jobs into the formal economy where they have protections and benefits?
It's a tough one, but it starts with simplifying labor laws and regulations. The current system is often too cumbersome and costly for small businesses.
Right, so it pushes them towards informality.
Exactly. We need a simpler, more transparent regulatory environment that encourages businesses to operate formally.
And alongside that,
Yes.
we need to invest in robust social safety nets, right?
Absolutely. Things like universal healthcare, unemployment insurance, a
Right.
stronger pension system.
Those would reduce the vulnerability of workers and encourage them to move towards formal employment.
Exactly.
And it would also boost domestic demand, right? If people have stable incomes and those protections, they'll have more money to spend further driving economic growth.
It's all interconnected. And it's these kinds of complex policy considerations that you as future UPSC officers need to be able to analyze and articulate.
Yeah.
There's no magic bullet, but by understanding these interconnected challenges and potential solutions, you can start to formulate effective policies that drive sustainable and equitable growth.
This is all incredibly relevant for your GS2 prep, right? We're talking governance, social justice, economic development. It's all here. And even if it doesn't directly show up in your prelims, understanding these issues gives you this deeper understanding of the challenges facing India and the potential pathways to progress.
And don't forget, this whole discussion is based on a recent analysis from the Hindu, a crucial resource for your UPSC prep to stay updated on current affairs.
We'll be right back. To wrap up our deep dive into this critical topic, don't go anywhere. All right, and we're back, continuing our exploration of this really complex question. Can India's reliance on cheap labor actually be holding us back?
A question with no easy answers.
Yeah, but it's one that any aspiring policymaker really needs to grapple with.
Absolutely. We've gone through the different aspects of this challenge, right? The persistence of informality,
Yeah.
the focus on low-cost production instead of adding value, and of course, all the social and economic consequences that come from this model.
We've also, kicked around some potential solutions, investing in human capital, those social safety nets, creating a better environment for formalization. But I'm curious from your perspective, what's the single most crucial element in making this transition to a more sustainable and equitable economic model?
It's tough to pick just one, but I'd say it really boils down to a fundamental shift in mindset.
Okay.
We have to stop thinking of labor as just a cost to be minimized and start recognizing it as a valuable asset, something that needs to be nurtured and developed.
That's a really powerful point.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing the dignity of work and understanding that investing in people ultimately benefits everyone, businesses, the economy, society as a whole.
Exactly. And that investment goes beyond just skills training.
Right.
It's about fair wages, safe working conditions, access to healthcare and education.
Yeah.
It's about creating an environment where workers are empowered to contribute their whole potential.
So for our listeners out there prepping for the UPSC, how can they translate these insights into actionable policy recommendations?
That's the big question, isn't it? And there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
But I'd encourage them to really think critically about the specific challenges and opportunities within different sectors. Like, for example, how can we incentivize the agricultural sector to adopt technology and improve the lives of those smallholder farmers? Or how can we promote innovation and upskilling in traditional industries like textiles without leaving workers behind? These are the kinds of questions that require nuanced, well-researched solutions.
And we can't forget about the political and social context, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Effective policy implementation means navigating, all those different stakeholder interests and building consensus for change.
Exactly. It's not just about having good ideas. It's about understanding what's actually possible and finding practical ways to put those ideas into action.
So to all our UPSC aspirants out there, as you dive deeper into the complexities of governance and economic development, remember this issue of labor and productivity.
Yep.
It's not just some theoretical concept.
Right.
It's at the heart of India's future.
And your ability to analyze these challenges, propose innovative solutions, and really communicate your vision effectively, that's going to be crucial in shaping that future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that wraps up our deep dive into this critical topic, inspired by that recent analysis and ever. The Hindu, remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more in-depth discussions on crucial UPSC topics, all sourced from reliable and insightful publications.
And if you have any questions or want to share your own perspective on this issue, please leave a comment below. We love hearing from you.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep striving to make a difference.